Could I request everyone to take their seats, please? Thank you for joining this session on inclusive value chains by H&M Foundation. It is my pleasure to welcome Shri Amit Yadav, Secretary in the Department of Social Justice and Empowerment, Government of India. He has been the Joint Secretary in the Department of Communications, Director General of Foreign Trade, and the Additional Secretary in the Department of Commerce. He has also served as the Chairperson of the New Delhi Municipal Council. Welcome to you, sir. I invite you up to deliver the keynote for this session. So the mic is already on. You don't need to do anything.
A very good morning to all of you here. I was given this topic of inclusive value chain, and as you would have heard, that value chain is across sectors. It is not only in the matters of what we will be talking today, but it is, when I was in the Commerce Ministry, we were looking at global value chain, and the global value chain was part of the trade thing. Then a lot of value chain happens in the agri sector, where farmers to producers to the final consumers is part of that. Then within the industry, there is a value chain. But what we will be talking about is the value chain in the poverty, the social protection, the social impact. And one of my experience of having worked in the sector is with regard to the poor sector, for poor people, and we'll talk about the waste pickers. Largely, that would be the focus for today's keynote address. So it's inclusive value chain for the waste pickers, the sanitation, and the sanitation workers, as we say, in the organized part of the whole thing. Value chain will impact people in all the three sectors: social, environment, and economic. But at the same time, I think so it's very important that the value chain leads to something which is a livelihood, something which is sustainable and has a social impact. The value chain also is pro-poor, especially for the waste pickers, as we will discuss and will come on the presentation, not on the presentation as I speak. As we know that the waste picker across the country, statistics say that almost 10% of the waste which is generated across globally comes from India. And there are estimates which range from few thousands to million people involved in the sector. And these are all guess estimates, but my guess is there would be a few million persons involved in this sector. And most of this is because they are unorganized, they are poor, they live in the marginalized sections of the society. And if you look at the caste configuration also, their caste configuration would be largely the caste which will be the scheduled caste and so on and so forth. So that's the sector within the country we are talking of, and the how the approach is that we do not exclude them from the what so-called national mainstream. And I think so the whole exercise and the whole journey is to empower them, and this pro-poor movement for the waste picker is part of that which the government is attempting to do, and which I believe is not possible only by the government. It has to go across the corporate, the voluntary organizations, and so on and so forth. I think so it's very important that it not only leads to job creation, but it also leads to jobs at the local level. It also at the same time would lead to in the area where they work rather than moving around. And largely, as we know that the waste collection has number of steps. One of the step is the actual collection, then the segregation, then the transportation, then the processing part of it. Processing is a very small organized part which the municipal bodies do. But otherwise the processing is and the segregation and the recycling part of it is largely done in the informal sector. These people whom are the waste pickers are people who are probably living in the landfill or near the waste collection locations where it's collected. And the attempt which has been going on and with which now the Department of Social Justice and Empowerment is doing is to ensure that they become part of the whole value chain cycle. We are working with the municipal bodies, we are working with other ministries to ensure that it's not only about their livelihood, it is about their health, giving them an identity and giving them covering under the Ayushman Bharat, skilling them, training them so that they can organize themselves to be part of this whole inclusive value chain. The 3 R's all of us know, the reduce, recycle and reuse. The reduction, if you see the whole chain in which it works in this unorganized, poor, marginalized people who are in the informal sector, is that they do the sorting, and then when they do the sorting, largely 3-4 main items they are looking for. They're looking for paper, cardboard, they're looking for glass, they're looking for metal and textile. And all of this fits in well with the recycle approach which is there. The recycling is, there are firms which are involved at a small level, local level, and then feeding into the bigger value chain. You'd be surprised that large shiploads come for waste textiles into the country. We actually import, and then it goes through the whole, but which is at a very large, bigger scale. And Kandla port is famous for that. And then thereafter, upscaling is done, and textiles are done. But otherwise, whether it's for plastic, whether it's for metal, whether it is for textiles and paper and cardboard, all of this feeds through this informal sector into a recycled product, which all of us use, whether it's paper or whether it's plastics in our daily life. And I think so a very useful service is done by such persons who live in the margins of the society. And by identifying them, by putting them as part of the coverage for giving them identity, giving them the coverage in the health sector, that is what we are trying to do. And I think so the whole value chain and making it inclusive is not only for the social benefit, but it's also recognizing that there are within us a very good service both in the urban area and in the rural areas being done by such collectors. Let me give you another example. which all of us would think is a very small. We brush our hair, and then, especially among women, if you have long hair, we tie it up and throw it away. Even that is collected, and then it goes into a whole value chain, which leads to small collection points. It's like a cooperative model. You collect at a smaller level, and then you move it to a bigger level, and then it becomes a bulk. Then it is sorted out. It's sorted out into length of hair, the color of hair, and then processing is done, which leads to value added products. So, as they say, there is gold in waste, and that gold, like small hair pieces, can actually lead to a big industry and a big exports. And you would be surprised that the exports in just this hairs from India, which now has been banned, was running into few 10,000 crores. So that big is the kind of value chain. The whole thing is, how do we make it inclusive? How do we put it from unorganized to organized? How do we make it pro-poor? How do we make it sustainable? How do we ensure that markets are available? How do we, as government, what we do is, we do the horizontal part of it, the policy intervention out of it, but ensure that vertically various sectors, whether it's, as I said, textiles, paper, plastic, anything, it gets organized, and then the small firms, big firms become part of the whole thing. There are also aspects of women which constitute a large force in the waste collection, and that is again a challenge which needs not only their safety issues, but making them part of this whole inclusive process. A lot of NGOs are working at a localized level on this aspect, but there is a need to have a bigger, therefore some of the rules, solid waste management rules by the ministries of environment were issued, where it mandates formation of groups, which mandates certain aspects for safety, which maintains good working practices, which needs to be followed to ensure that the people who are working are provided that dignity, provided their health, provided safety, and become a part of the whole economic inclusion which we are looking for. It also fits in with the SDG goals. I think so. SDG goal 6 talks about this. So that is also a part of this effort by the government on ensuring that the sector, people working in this sector are much more better organized and deliver to them the basic requirements which all of us otherwise in our daily life just tend to ignore, which is very important for them. And I think so the whole approach of ours has been with that not only does it help in our environment part of it, but it is also something which is sustainable, and which also, if the corporates work with it, it fits into their social values and the social objectives for which corporates are formed, small, big, or very large. So, and it brings in the circularity in the economy, which is a very important part. So I think so the speakers here, the panel will further elaborate on it, but I'll stop there and just give you a food for thought that why it is important that even people whom we see collecting waste at the landfill site, at small village roadside, or our municipal garbage dumps or garbage collection centers are to be organized, are to be made inclusive as part of a social, economic and political integration. into the whole value chain, which is a very important role of the government, but working with the across the sector, in the private, corporate, NGOs, and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amitji. It is my pleasure now to welcome the panel for this discussion. Anish Malpani is a finance professional turned social entrepreneur, tapping into the potential of multi-layered plastics. Gayatri Divecha, who heads sustainability and social impact for Godrej and associated companies, spearheading the company's sustainability vision, is also joining us today. Indumathi is a waste entrepreneur with WECC, with an inspiring journey from a life of hardship to becoming an international advocate for Indian waste pickers. She's a very familiar face. Many of you would have seen her on international panels as recently as about a few weeks ago. We're also joined by Vishal Chawla, who is a leader at Round Glass Foundation, working towards large-scale collective impact models in the area of education, sports, regen agri, and livelihood. Anish, please do join us. I've introduced you already. Gayatri, welcome. The moderator for the session is Akshay Soni, who heads the ecosystem work at the Nudge Institute as managing partner of CSI. Welcome to the panel. Thank you for being here.
Great. Thanks everyone for being here. Sorry we are running late. The Delhi rains. That is something I didn't think I'd say fairly often after staying in Bombay, but seems like this set of rains in Delhi has been very different. That's it. Again, thanks for being here. I'll just spend a couple of minutes creating the context before I open it up to my exceptional set of panelists to talk about the perspectives that they're bringing in. So for everyone in the room, circularity is something that you will all be well aware of, right? It's something that's been explored consistently, spoken about. We need to have circular chains. We need to ensure that we save the planet, we have sustainability, so on and so forth. It's something that's very well understood, so I won't spend time on it. What we're seeking to do with this panel is, set up dialogue, grow the dialogue on taking it a step further, inclusive circularity. And what does that mean? So for that, while Napina did introduce me as the person who runs the ecosystem work for the Nudge, today I am not representing the Nudge, at least for the next hour. What I'm representing is Samuhik Shakti. This basically one-of-a-kind initiative that was started and conceived and funded by H&M Foundation. It's been running over the last 4 years, will continue for another 3 years. Basically, 9 organizations, implementing organizations, have come together to create a life of more dignity and greater agency for waste pickers in Bangalore. That was the start of the process, and over time we basically realized that in waste picking, circularity is basically what they ensure, right? Inclusion, however, is not. In that value chain, there is a break. They are the ones who get squeezed when the price of plastic goes down. And they don't gain much when it does go up, right? The rest of the value chain does. And the thought process was, how do we change that for them? So an example of a commercial initiative that was taken was that all the buttons on any H&M garment that is made in India, wherever it is sold globally, doesn't matter, anything that is made in India, a portion of that button is made from recycled plastic. And that plastic comes from waste pickers who are paid at or above minimum wage. So that was an example of where commercials can actually take into account inclusive circularity. And if they're not part of it, then sooner or later that value chain will break down, was the thought process that Samahik Shakti had. So with that little bit of context, I'm basically going to not bore you any longer. I will talk about some of the learnings we've had at various times during the panel, but I'll now throw it open to the people you're here to hear, which is my set of panelists. So Vishal, I'll just start off with you. Just to build on what I was saying, what does to Samahik Shakti, H&M Foundation, that's what an inclusive value chain meant in our work. What does it mean to Round Glass Foundation?
Thanks, Akshay. So the Round Glass Foundation, we work primarily in Punjab. And our entire approach to development there is to look at how we can bring in a holistic approach towards development. So therefore, looking at every element of development that we can. Certainly one of the areas that we focus very heavily on is on environment sustainability. And within that, we have a program for waste management. This program is today a solid waste management program, which we're running in rural Punjab. And that's where most of our work is happening today. For us, it all starts right from the beginning, from the program design. And what are the outcomes we want to look at, and what does the program need to deliver? Typically, we look at seeing how it can impact the lives of the people we work with. Yes, very often it is working with the most marginalized, but also sometimes working with the rest of the community, which contributes to some parts of the issues or some parts of the problem. Having said that, I think a lot of our work is, when we start a program, we do necessarily go work with the community, and when I say community, work with, let's say, the village panchayat, with the village council, with youth communities and women from the village, to actually see how the program design should look like, what the outcome should be, and how ownership can happen. And all of this, I think no development does happen today without having an economic, shall I say, an economic facet or economic nuance to it. And so therefore, I think that is something we also build into our program in terms of how a program can be self-sustainable over a period of time. But again, definitely a sign-off through the stakeholders who are, and the community definitely is one part of them.
Thank you. Gayatri, just wanted to ask you very similarly what an inclusive value chain means for Godrej, because there are just so many stakeholders in the game, right? You've got residents, you've got municipalities, you've got waste pickers. So how do you ensure that it is inclusive?
So most of our work at Godrej Industries Group looks at solid waste management from households till MRFs. And for us, an inclusive value chain, in that part of the overall value chain really means that all actors are seen, heard, engaged with, and involved in the change that we're trying to bring about. And, all of our work, and, I say our work, but that's, Godrej is a small part of it. The much larger work is done by our partners in, some 15 municipalities currently. All of the work is really based on a very deep understanding of what are the challenges that each and every actor faces. Because waste is really, we see it as everybody's problem, right? It cuts across genders, class, political parties, all of that, right? So it's one of those areas that you cannot, it's impossible to make change without truly being inclusive. And so we invest a lot of time and energy in extensive baselining, engaging with communities, whether it's households, different kinds of households across these cities, waste workers, all of the urban local bodies, to understand what are their challenges, what will shift behaviors, and so on. And for us, the key is whatever solution we design with our partners, that has to have existing waste workers at the center. It cannot, solutions cannot come at the detriment of livelihoods, and that too dignified livelihoods. So we look at organizing them into self-help groups. We look at access to entitlements, of course, paying above minimum wage, and then how can we create MRFs and facilities where segregation, etc., is happening that are dignified, right? I mean, nobody wants to pick through things with their hands, even if you're wearing gloves. And can we not look at upgrading what sorts of systems are available, high-speed water sprays, etc., to clean problematic plastics, amongst other things. That's how we sort of overall see it.
Thank you. Anish, coming to you, it's been, Without's been one of the companies that has embraced inclusivity and has it at its core. So, could you just describe for us your journey and how you got here?
Thanks, Akshay. So yeah, we're Without, and what we do is we are trying to solve waste management holistically, looking at it both from a social perspective and environmental perspective. When we researched the waste space, we found that there are close to 1.5 to 4 million waste pickers who live really poor lives on a multidimensional level. A majority of them are women. 90% of waste pickers in Pune are women. At the same time, 50 to 80% of the waste in India is untreated. So that's an economic loss, an environmental hazard. It's the largest producer of greenhouse of methane when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions, disease. So we saw there was a social issue, there was an environmental issue, and there's an economic loss, and we wanted to solve this problem holistically from the ground up. So we try to pride ourselves in being deeply inclusive and focus deeply on technology. So we started off with packets of chips, MLP, multi-layered plastic. This is considered unrecyclable, the least recycled plastic waste. We found that nobody wanted to work on this because paisa nahi hai. Right, so and then we developed technology, and I think if you've heard of us, we made the world's first sunglasses from these packets of chips, and which was pretty cool. But what I want to talk about is how we try to be deeply inclusive of formal waste, because we hire them into the supply chain, we graduate them out of waste picking, their incomes increase 2 to 3x, and they get health insurance. They get flexible work, they get job security, they get ESOPs in the company. Minimum wage in India is like, at the national level, it's 5,000 rupees, right? And every state has different minimum wages depending on which part of their, in Maharashtra, it's 14,000, 15,000, barely, right? And I think that's also, it's a lot like, and I'll get into some of the challenges. I don't know if that's a question that you had, but I want to talk about the challenges we face. And a lot of people think the challenges are, how do you incorporate waste pickers into the supply chain? They're like not educated, they don't, they're not skilled. That is like not the hardest part. Yes, there are some challenges there, but the amount of investment we make into that, we get that in return tenfold. They're more loyal, they're more committed, they're more hardworking, and they're so appreciative of the work, right? The real challenges we face are two-pronged. One is an infrastructure problem, right? So let me just set the context. We only work with 10 waste pickers so far. We're a small, tiny lab. Out of the 10 waste pickers, 7 of the waste pickers we have are women. 5 of them are either separated or single. 2 of their husbands committed suicide. One of them is separated. One of them expired. 2 of them are separated because they were abusive or alcoholic. They're single women, mainly handling household, handling like a household of 3 to 5 people, right? The challenges we face with them is, okay, we upskill them, we train them, they're no longer waste pickers. But now, for instance, we give them health insurance, right? They're like, oh, wow, they get health insurance. They don't know how to use health insurance. So what's the point of giving them health insurance, right? So I'm going to talk about 3 folks, Sandhya, Seema, and Jayashri. Sandhya was admitted in the hospital. She had health insurance, but she didn't know how to use it. So we asked her to give us the invoices. It took us 2 days, full days, to fill out the paperwork online to get this reimbursed, right? And then out of the 35,000 she was owed, she got paid only 32,000, and we're fighting for the remaining 3,000. But how is Sandhya supposed to solve this by herself? So now when Jayashri fell ill and went to the hospital, we took her to a hospital that gives, that, covers health insurance. And the problem with Jayashri was that they didn't trust that she has health insurance. So they asked for like 5,000 rupees up front as a security deposit. She's like, where will I get this 5,000 rupees from, right? So I get a frantic call being like, can you please transfer 5,000 rupees so she can be admitted into the hospital? So our infrastructure is not based. Seema had to take because her husband has liver issues, to take a loan from a money lender at 10% interest per month, 120% interest per month. When she couldn't pay back the principal, she came crying, being like, can I please have a loan to pay back my principal, which is 1 lakh rupees, otherwise he'll take my house away, right? So, so that's like, is the infrastructure ready? We don't cater to the folks at the lowest level. We can talk about them, and we can give them health insurance, but that's not enough. And the second challenge we face, I think, is more incentives, right? All of the big names here, we can cut the crap a little bit, right? All of these big names here, they're all incentivized. And I remember having this conversation with you, Akshay, right? There are 3 metrics you look at. You look at lives touched, lives impacted, and lives changed, right? Everyone is incentivized to maximize lives touched because big numbers, 10,000 waste pickers got eyewear, doesn't change anything, right? 10,000 waste pickers got a meal, nothing, right? Anish, only 10 waste pickers. Wo to kuch nahi hai yaar. And so we're not incentivized to go deep. We're incentivized to be like big numbers. Our funders are like, Anish, how many communities do you pick waste from? Because then all the households that are living there will be affected, so your numbers impacted will be high. I'm like, that's nonsense, right? Like, that's not how we want to be measuring success. So if we as social enterprises and nonprofits are incentivized to bloat numbers to make ourselves look good, where is the depth and impact, right? So I think these are the challenges we face from the ground up, and how do we work together to and we're trying our hardest to build financially viable solutions that do not depend on charity to scale, because charity and sympathy are extremely hard to scale. But yeah, anyway, I'll stop. But that was some of the challenges we faced and a little bit of context on the work we do.
No, thanks, Anish, for that passionate piece there. And just also, last but most important, the voice from the ground. तो इंदुमती, आपके मुताबिक कैसे व्यापार बनाना चाहिए जिसमें सब शामिल हों? इंक्लूसिव वैल्यू चेन कैसे बनेगी?
ಸರ್ ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಫಸ್ಟ್ ನನಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡೋಕ್ಕೆ ಅವಕಾಶ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಕ್ಕೆ. ಈ ಪ್ಲಾಸ್ಟಿಕ್ ಅಂತಲ್ಲ, ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಮ್ಯಾನೇಜ್ಮೆಂಟಲ್ಲಿ ಮೇಲ್ಗಡೆಯಿಂದ ಕೆಳಗಡೆವರೆಗೂ ತುಂಬ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟು. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಪಿಕ್ಕರ್ ಅನ್ನೋದು ತುಂಬ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಅಂತ ನಾನು ಹೇಳೋಕ್ಕೆ ಇಷ್ಟಪಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಯಾಕಂದರೆ ಇವಾಗ ಎಷ್ಟೋ ಡೆವಲಪ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಗ್ತಾಯಿದೆ ನಮ್ಮ ದೇಶ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು, ಆದರೂ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಪಿಕ್ಕರ್ ಇನ್ನೂ ರೋಡಲ್ಲೇ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಲ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ಫಿಲ್ಲಲ್ಲೇ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇನ್ನು ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಮಾತ್ರ ಇವತ್ತುವರೆಗೂ ಬದಲಾವಣೆ ಬಂದೇ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಬಟ್ 100ರಲ್ಲಿ 10% ಮಾತ್ರ ಬದಲಾವಣೆ ಕಂಡಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಬಟ್ ಅದೂ ಯಾರಿಂದ ಅಂದರೆ ಕೆಲವೊಂದು ROಗಳಿಂದ, NGOಗಳಿಂದ, ಕೆಲವೊಂದು ತರಬೇತಿಯಿಂದ ಒಂದು 10 ಜನಕ್ಕೆ ಬದಲಾವಣೆ ಬಂದಿದೆ. ಇನ್ನು 90 ಜನ ಇರೋ ಸ್ಥಾನದಲ್ಲೇ ಇನ್ನು ಇದುವರೆಗೂ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಬಟ್ ಅವರಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ಬದಲಾವಣೆ ತರಬೇಕು. ಅವರು ಕೂಡ ಡೀಸೆಂಟ್ ವರ್ಕನ್ನು ನಾವು ಕೊಡಬೇಕು. ಮತ್ತು ಲ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ಫಿಲ್ಲರ್ಗಳನ್ನ ಕ್ಲೋಸ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ಹೇಳೋದಾದರೆ ಡೀಸೆಂಟ್ ವರ್ಕ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಯಾವ ಥರ ಅಂತ ನೀವೆಲ್ಲ ಕೇಳ್ಬೋದು. ಕಾಂಪೋಸ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು, ಅಗ್ರಿಗೇಷನ್ ಸೆಂಟ್ರಲ್ ಕೆಲಸವನ್ನು ಕೊಡಿಸ್ಬೋದು, ಮತ್ತು MRFಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆಲಸವನ್ನು ಕೊಡಿಸ್ಬೋದು, ಡೋರ್ ಟು ಡೋರ್ ಕಲೆಕ್ಷನನ್ನು ಕೊಡಿಸ್ಬೋದು. ಇವಾಗ ಒಂದು ವ್ಯತ್ಯಾಸನ ನೀವೇ ಕಾಣ್ಬೋದು. ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಪಿಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅನ್ನೋದಕ್ಕೂ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಕಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅನ್ನೋದಕ್ಕೂ ತುಂಬಾ ವ್ಯತ್ಯಾಸ ಇದೆ. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂ ಚೈನಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾರನ್ನೂ ಬಿಡದಿರ ನಾವು ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಒಂದು ಡೀಸೆಂಟ್ ವರ್ಕನ್ನು ಕೊಡಿಸ್ಬೇಕಂತ ನಾನು ಬಯಸ್ತೀನಿ. ಮತ್ತು ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಏನಂದರೆ, ಇವತ್ತಿಗೂ 62%ಗಿಂತ ಹೆಚ್ಚಾಗಿ 10,000ಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಕಡಿಮೆ ದುಡಿಮೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರೋಂಥ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಪಿಕ್ಕರ್ ಇವತ್ತಿಗೂ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ.
Thank you. For the people who didn't get that, one of my colleagues, Bharat, has kindly agreed to do translation so that all of us can get what Indumathi was trying to say.
So only about 10% of the waste pickers in the waste management ecosystem can access or reap benefits of the development that have happened in the waste management sector. Like Indumathi mentioned, the aggregation centers, the MRFs, or anything that has gone beyond the waste picking per se. It could be, decent or safe working conditions, social security, increased income, getting formal employment, health benefits, etc. So when there are any changes in the waste management system, the first choice of the workers should be the waste pickers, is what Indumathi is appealing for. And there is a need to transition from waste picking, which implies picking the waste from streets, the landfills, informally, to waste collection, which is segregated waste from households, establishments, and which is more formal as well. Hence, there's a need to ensure that rest of the 90% of the waste pickers who are not included in this fold to be included here. And the main way to achieve this is by conducting capacity building trainings, awareness building trainings, to ensure that the waste pickers are aware of their rights and what is possible in the ecosystem. And to do this, everyone across the value chain, be it the government officials, the civil society organizations, or the general public, has to join hands and ensure that the waste pickers are given the recognition and the resources they deserve.
Thanks, Bharat. Gayatri, just wanted to come back to you and double-click slightly on what you were saying. You spoke about using water as an example, high-pressure water to clean up, etc., all of that. Unfortunately, most of the innovation that seems to happen, and while without is not necessarily an example of that, but most innovation seems to be on mechanization, which takes away a waste picker's livelihood. And I understand, and a lot of people in the audience might feel, by the way, that there should be no one doing waste picking, right? Like there was this entire concept of there should be no one doing manual scavenging, but it is an important gateway job. Very often when people come from rural India to urban India, it is one of the first jobs that they end up doing in cities before they get other jobs and transition out of waste picking. Some continue to do it, but others transition out also. So it's not just something that should simply be taken away. But just on that context, wanted to ask you that, how do we ensure, given your experience of working on it, how do we ensure that waste pickers are part of it, are empowered? Because the power dynamics also don't work in their favor, right? Traditionally, you worked in Bombay also, and residents in Bombay, I've been in discussions on solid waste management, and residents expect to get paid to segregate their waste. Yeah. So I understand that, but it is something that took me by surprise the first time I heard it. So how do we solve for this?
So we focus a lot on on citizens actually and households to segregate their waste properly, and it's one would assume that at some point it becomes common sense, but it's really tragic that it doesn't, right? Places like Bombay, for example, are meant to, so residents' welfare associations and, buildings above a certain number of houses and a certain threshold of waste are supposed to have composting on site in the building. I mean, I can tell you, I am yet to find this elusive building that has a compost bin, right? But these are the things that also bring a bit more dignity to livelihoods, right? Instead, you have households segregate waste. Organic waste can go into a compost bin, and your existing worker works on that in a much more dignified way than actually going through things and so on. So, that's one piece is actually fixing the source of the problem. And really, to my mind, the source of the problem is all of us citizens, right, who are refusing to do our basic bit. Whether it's even cleaning if everybody washed their takeout container, we wouldn't need these things at MRFs, right? It takes a minute of time. So, we believe that in a landscape where not a lot of people focus on not a lot of work is focused on really trying to change behaviors of households, and maybe it's because one of our companies is an FMCG, and so we understand the power of marketing and behavior change. That's what we place a huge premium on. Aside from that, like I mentioned, self-help groups, like Anish said, not just giving the insurance, but actually standing there and helping people use, the insurance or get access to their entitlements when they, when push comes to shove, right? Not just saying, hey, you have a right to this. The other interesting thing we've seen with one of our partners in Goa, Sampurna and us run this sorting facility, this MRF for flexibles and MLPs. And, you know, that was quite an interesting journey for us because, you know, how do you separate these various qualities and grades of flexible plastic? And, you know, we sort of had to come up with ways, you know, there's things marked on it in, you know, and written, but the print is so small, even with glasses, I can't see it. So, and it's all in English, right? So, how are people to know what's in that? And even if it was, you know, even if it had the chemical compound or whatever that the polymer that it was made of, again, who understands it? So, you know, we actually worked with the employees of this MRF that said, you know, we can figure this out by the sound it makes when we wave it next to our ear. And that was just, it was such an aha moment for all of us. And now that's how people are trained to segregate these things. Once those flexibles actually go into a recycling facility where they're made into pellets and then sold to companies that, you know, make pipes, plastic pipes, all of the employees of the MRF have a stake in that sale. So that's the other way to really ensure that, you know, especially when we're working on an economic model, it is truly a fair one.
Thank you. That is actually pretty interesting, the stake itself. Because, yeah, commercialization is what has been the big challenge in this. And love that you also spoke about consumer behavior. We also felt, and again, maybe H&M Foundation and therefore H&M Connect and hence marketing, looked at the power of marketing. One of our organizations, one of our partners in there, BBC Media Action, actually did a ton of work around behavior change for people in Bangalore. Now, in Bangalore, we are a tad ahead, to be fair. So there was fertile ground. There was already some level of segregation, but there was a ton of work that was done around it. And in case people in the audience have not heard Happy Number before, I would suggest you do a search on YouTube for Happy Number Bangalore. It's a great song that was created on waste pickers, the level of importance that they have and the massive difference they make to the city of Bangalore, which would otherwise drown in garbage. It was all designed to change people's behavior and ensure that they started segregating. A bunch of other campaigns done, but that's the one that touches the heart the most. So thanks so much for that. And Vishal, coming back to you, just 5 years of operations. I know Anish said scale can sometimes be the enemy of depth, but just 5 years of operations, over 2,000 villages, over 2 million people. You've grown a really long way, really fast. How do you ensure that you still keep inclusivity in there?
So actually, our story for growth really has been a story where we've been able to actually work with the community. So I think, while the numbers look very large, and they have been actually work that's been done with the community and by the community. Having said that, I think as an organization, we do want to reach all 12,700 villages in Punjab, and that's our goal. And so we're working towards a 10-year plan, or 2035, but that's what we want to do actually. So we want to reach all 12,700 villages in Punjab by 2035. And we have those plans made for how we want to do and what we will do for that. But I think very importantly in this, as our programs have evolved and as we've gone and had interactions with different communities, different regions, etc., we do realize that there is a lot of acceptance for change that you can bring in. Now, one has to, and it's nothing new that we're doing. It's not rocket science. We're not reinventing anything. We're probably taking solutions which exist in another place and just presenting them in a method or a manner which is acceptable to the local community. Our work, again, everything that we do in terms of design has to have, we try and make sure that our programs essentially have an economic opportunity. If there is one, we want to use that. So I'll give you an example of waste management, for example. Our work has been all in the rural waste management as we speak right now. We bring in catalytic investment in terms of some investments with regard to how we engage with the community, with the households, etc. And we also then work with the village council, the panchayat, to see how they can leverage Manrega funding. So I'm very happy to state that for every 100 rupees we bring in, the government invests another 200. So really it's a multiplier effect in terms of investment that we're putting in over here. Our programs have been designed to be self-sustainable. Now, typically a program is good, or I would imagine it's good if we go there, work with the community for a period of time, then can go away where the program can run on its own. So typically what we've done is, and this is, Gayatri, to your point of how Bombay societies perhaps don't work, we go and we appoint a waste collector in every village, for example, train the waste collector, set up a route map, provide every household with a blue and a green dustbin, a very simple, ordinary, basic thing to do. And then we work with the Manrega department, then makes a composting pit. So we have the entire, all stakeholders come in. So essentially our program is more of a behavior change program where we actually engage with the community, with the households, demonstrate, talk to them. We even use marketing gimmicks like a rickshaw in the village with a mic, just talking about why it's important. And there is a very good reception. I think it's very important to be able to communicate the value for the program, and that does help. And so we also get the waste collector to take a service fee from every household. Now, the village households, while are not the most, shall I say, wealthy households, but we're still able to get between 40 to 50 rupees per household as a service fee. So on an average, a small village would have about 200 and 250 households. So you get in about 12,000 rupees that the waste collector gets as income coming in. Plus all the dry waste that is there, whether it's glass, cardboard, etc., that also brings another 1,000, 1,500 odd. So there is one family which does get their livelihood coming through this. Now, when we do the program, we don't have 100% adoption. Typically, that never happens. We have about 80-85% adoption from every household that does come in. And we've seen that, if we are able to bring in behavior change communication, behavior change dialogue, supported with infrastructure and service, that's the model that we think has worked really well for us. And now with the work we're doing, we also are now in conversations with the state's Swachh Bharat Mission program to see how we can work with them to actually set up a PMU to work through various more blocks and villages. So far, we've had a sporadic approach. We just went and found opportunistically the villages we were able to go into. Now we're looking at it more strategically and getting into clusters. So today we have line of sight of about 2,500 villages, 2,500 villages in about 10 clusters, where we'll go and now be more deliberate in our approach. So therefore also looking at setting up resource recovery centers, and that's when the opportunity for some circularity can come in. But having said that, today with these compost facilities that have been put, this has created almost about 20 facilities to manage about roughly 25,000 tons of wet waste, which gets converted every year to almost 5,000 tons of compost. So effectively, we've taken away 25,000 tons of wet waste, raw waste from landfill. And next year, when we go to 2,000, that will reach about 200,000 tons of wet waste. We'll take it away, and it'll go back into the local farmers' community. So that again itself is an opportunity for a enterprise to build up. So yeah, so that's what we do.
Thank you. For all of the people here who actually live in apartment buildings, I'd like you to think about one person in the apartment building who'd actually, forget waste collecting, would actually take up the rally cry, take some time out to take up a rally cry for that itself. In some things, I think rural India is probably more advanced than us in urban India. But yeah, that's just for you to think about. Anish, just coming back to you. I know you spoke about funding, but that was philanthropic. Just wanted to, just 10 waste pickers, Anish. So how do you scale this up? What's the path forward? and what are some of the bottlenecks that we need to deal with, whether on the private enterprise side or on the public policy side. What would basically open this up and for you to actually come back here 5 years later, and scale is good, provided it is attained correctly, and say that now there are 10,000 waste pickers that we employ, and Without is a huge brand that is selling globally.
Yeah, and I want to clarify, like, I'm not against scale, right? Scale is really important. I'm a finance guy, and all about the numbers. I think what's the holy grail for the impact space is scaling depth. And scaling depth is like, there are people who don't believe that at all. They're like, oh, no, it's not possible. I think that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to scale depth. But scaling depth takes time. It requires patience. And I think this is not a fintech or a Silicon Valley company that can scale by just buying server space, right? And spreading to the internet. It takes time. And so what we look for from investors is patient capital. We want to give financial return. We want to be able to scale the depth that we create. We look at it from the ground up, right? My perspective is that if you rush to scale, you're just wasting some money. You potentially could be wasting money. So how can you focus on scaling the depth? So like when we look at the waste problem, we look at it very holistically. Waste is a decentralized problem. It's generated in houses, it's generated in centers like this. But right now, all solutions are focused on centralizing it. Let's take it all and put it into one factory. All the PET goes to Nashik, all the HDP goes to Hyderabad, all the wet waste goes somewhere else. And composting, as much as it's not a solution. Compost sells for 10 rupees a kilo. A suicidal farmer does not want compost. You're not going to pay for compost. They want fertilizers that can help them with yield so they can make money. So composting is not the only solution. So we have to be more nuanced about what we do. So we're trying to look at things. So our thesis is, how do you fundamentally increase the value of waste? Make everything as valuable as possible, and then multiply this in a decentralized fashion. As decentralized as possible. It's not going to be fully decentralized, it's not going to be fully centralized, but dancing, we call it sub-centralization, dancing between this. So like, let's say 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, not only are we tackling large amounts of waste that is currently not being recycled, but we're also graduating waste pickers out of this profession. And Indumathi is a living example of this, right? She still calls herself a waste picker, but she's not. She's an entrepreneur. She's leading 88 people in her organization, and that's we can have formal waste collection. We don't need informal waste pickers, right? But if we are going to displace them, it has to be into positive livelihoods, into better, more. After all that we do for our waste pickers, former waste pickers, when we ask them, hey, what is the best part about this job? What do you think they say? Paisa time par milta hai. We get paid on time. After everything we do, that's what they care about, right? So how do you, so I think looking at it holistically, not rushing it, and then scaling it, because you don't want to scale a bleeding model. I've worked in places outside where models that are not working because foundations want to increase numbers. They're like, hey, I'm only taking this money and opening a new office in suburban Nairobi because I don't get funding for improving my model. I only get funding for scaling my model. Your model is broken. Theek hai, scale a broken model. And I don't blame her for it, right? So I think just having the patience. So maybe not 5 years, Akshay. Give me 10. But then hopefully it's long-term, permanent progress that is, sizably changing things. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Long way to go.
No, makes total sense. Scaling depth has always been challenging, which is why, at least in my journey in the social sector, I started looking at it as the volume of impact, because you have both depth as well as breadth. Till you're growing the volume, I'm comfortable. The moment the volume starts to either become stagnant or drop is when I start getting intensely uncomfortable. But yeah, I think everyone needs to evolve their own methodology for how you're going to think about or look at impact. I do believe that scale is critical, because if we're going to, the point is that very often we start believing while tackling a social problem, we start growing, organizations. The point is we came in to solve a problem. We should solve it within our lifetime, be done with it, walk away and do something else, right? If the problem persists beyond us on a consistent basis, then we've it's like walking on sand, right? That's the famous quote. And the tide comes in and we're done. So rather finish it off. But you were referring to Indumati's organization, so I'll use that and segue there. तो इंदुमती आप हमारे लिए तो प्रेरणा स्रोत हैं, लेकिन और बहुत बहुत लोगों के लिए हैं, लेकिन अपनी जर्नी के बारे में, अपने सफ़र के बारे में थोड़ा बताएंगी, कैसे यहाँ पे आज आप इतने लोगों को नौकरी देती हैं, तो वो वहाँ कैसे पहुँची, उसके बारे में थोड़ा बताएंगी.
ಓಕೆ ಸರ್, ನಾನು 20 ವರ್ಷಕ್ಕೆ ಮುಂಚೆ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಪಿಕ್ಕರಾಗಿ ಸಿಂಗಲಾಗಿ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಪಿಕ್ಕರಾಗಿ ನಾನು ರೋಡ್ ಹೋಗಿ ಪಿಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾಯಿದ್ದೆ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ನಾನು ಇನ್ನೂ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಮೇಲೆ ಹೋಗಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ನನಗೆ ಅನ್ನಿಸ್ತು. ಆವಾಗ ನಾನು ಸ್ಕ್ರಾಪ್ ಅಂಗಡಿಯನ್ನು ಶುರು ಮಾಡಿದೆ. ಅದ ನಂತರ ನನಗೆ ಹಸಿರು ದಳ NGO ನನಗೆ ಪರಿಚಯ ಆಯಿತು. ಪರಿಚಯ ಆದ ನಂತರ ಕೆಲವೊಂದು ಟ್ರೈನಿಂಗನ್ನು ಕೊಟ್ಟರು ನನಗೆ, ಲೀಡ್ರ್ಶಿಪ್ ಟ್ರೈನಿಂಗ್ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಮತ್ತು ಸಿಟಿಜನ್ ಹತ್ರ ಯಾವ ಥರ ಮಾತಾಡಬೇಕು, ಆಫೀಸರ್ಗಳ ಹತ್ರ ಯಾವ ಥರ ಮಾತಾಡಬೇಕು, ಮತ್ತು ನಮ್ಮ ಹಕ್ಕುಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ಯಾವ ಥರ ಪಡ್ಕೋಬೇಕು, ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ನನಗೆ ಟ್ರೈನಿಂಗ್ಗಳು ಹಸಿರುದಲ ಕೊಡ್ತು. ಹಸಿರುದಲ ಕೊಟ್ಟ ಮೇಲೆ ನನಗೆ ಧೈರ್ಯವನ್ನು ತುಂಬಿತು. ಆವಾಗ ನಾನು ಡೋರ್ ಟು ಡೋರ್ ಕಲೆಕ್ಷನ್ನ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದೆ. ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ ನಂತರ ನಾನು ಒಬ್ಬಳು ಆಗಿದ್ದವಳು ಇವತ್ತು 3 ವಾರ್ಡನ್ನು ನಾನು ಶುರು ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ. 3 ವಾರ್ಡಲ್ಲಿ 88 ಎಂಪ್ಲಾಯನ್ನು ನಾನು ಸೃಷ್ಟಿ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡೆ. ಮತ್ತು 2 ಕಂಪ್ನಿಯನ್ನು ರಿಜಿಸ್ಟ್ರ್ ಮಾಡಿದೆ. 2 ಕಂಪ್ನಿಯನ್ನು ರಿಜಿಸ್ಟರ್ ಮಾಡಿದ ಮೇಲೆ ಇಂಟರ್ನ್ಯಾಷನಲ್ ಅಲಯನ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಪಿಕ್ಕರಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ಲಾಸ್ಟಿಕ್ ಟಿಟಿಗೋಸ್ಕರ 20 ಮಿಲಿಯನ್ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಪಿಕ್ಕರ್ಗೋಸ್ಕರ ಒಂದು ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸಾಕ್ಷನ್ ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೋಗಿ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತಾಡೋ ಲೆವೆಲ್ಗೆ ನನ್ನನ್ನು ತರಬೇತಿಯನ್ನು ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂದರೆ ಅದು ಹಸಿರು ದಳ. ಮತ್ತು ನಮ್ಮ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಪಿಕ್ಕರ್ ಹಕ್ಕುಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ಪಡ್ಕೋಬೇಕು ಅಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ನಾವೇ ಒಂದು ಯೂನಿಯನನ್ನು ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದಲ್ಲಿ, ತ್ಯಾಜ್ಯ ಶ್ರಮಿಕ ಸಂಘ ಅಂತ. ಇವತ್ತು ನಮ್ಮ ಇಡೀ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಪಿಕ್ಕರ್ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದಲ್ಲಿ 4,23,606 ಜನನ ನಾವು ಎಲ್ಲೂ ಬಿಡಬಾರ್ದು, ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ಒಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ನಾವು ಸೇರಿಸಿ ತಗೊಂಡು ಹೋಗಬೇಕು, ಈ ತರಬೇತಿ ಪೂರ್ತಿ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಸಿಗಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋ ಒಂದು ಕಾರಣದಿಂದ ನಾವು ಯೂನಿಯನನ್ನು ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಮತ್ತು ಅದು ಅಲ್ದಿರ 2023 ನಮ್ಮ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಎಂಟರ್ಪ್ರೆನರ್ ಅವಾರ್ಡ್ ಕೂಡ ನನಗೆ ಸಿಕ್ತು.
So Indumathi began her journey as a waste picker, solo waste picker, and then she transitioned into a segregation worker in a private scrap shop. Driven by ambition, she started her own scrap shop, providing place for waste pickers to sell their materials which they picked in the streets. This led to a connection with Hasrudala, a Bangalore-based non-profit supporting waste pickers. Sharing her challenges with them opened doors to various training programs on leadership, how to speak to citizens, how to fight for the waste picker rights, and how to also be a better entrepreneur. These experiences helped her to in essential entrepreneurial skills, enabling her to transform from a solo waste picker to a business owner who's currently managing the waste of 3 wards in Bangalore and running 3 dry waste collection centers, which is a big thing in Bangalore, and employing 88 waste pickers. And she has also registered 2 of her companies currently. Along with that, she is also part of various conferences and fighting for the just transition of the waste pickers into circular economy, and ensuring that they are fighting the fight uniformly. Along with that, she has also started Tyajya Shramika Stranga, which is fighting for the rights of upwards of around 4,20,000 waste pickers in Karnataka alone. So along with this, she's actively wanting her employees to become entrepreneurs in the future as well.
Just as an aside, the first time I met Indumathi, I realized we were talking about a minimum wage and she spoke about a living wage. So I've got the questions here. There are a lot of questions, so I apologize. I think they'll kick me off the stage if I try to ask all of them. In case some don't get answered, do catch hold of me later and I will try and see whether we can get it addressed even after Chacha. That said, I'll just pose a couple of questions to the panel and let them answer those. So first up is that the Western world generates a lot more plastic paper waste compared to countries like India. despite what you were saying on methane emissions. And is it, how do they manage it better? Is it better segregation at source? So I'll let, yeah. I know, I can see the shaking heads. I would also have gone the same way, but please.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting. First of all, India and Asia produces a lot of waste as well, but the per capita is much lesser than the US. The US per capita waste or the West is much higher. A lot of their waste, the collection systems are good, so you don't see a lot of waste on the streets, but a lot of it's shipped out. A lot of it was shipped to China, a lot of it was shipped to, but now it's banned now, so now it's in other, so it's like banned in India as well. So they found certain Southeast Asian countries that are willing to take this waste or buy this waste. And to be fair, like what's really interesting is that the reason, if you look at plastic recycling in the world, in India, the rates are between 30% to 60% of plastic in India is recycled, whether you believe the numbers or not. The global rates are 9%. But then when you double click on this, if you look at PET bottles, these Bisleri bottles, in India, the recycling rates are up to 80-90%. In Europe, it's 50%. In the US, it's 30%, right? So it all varies. And the reason why it's really high in India is because of our waste pickers, right? And it's not a good thing, not necessarily, it's because it's income for them. 50% of the income of a waste picker is plastic waste. So when you talk about banning plastic, it's not as simple as, imagine somebody took 50% of your wealth away. So I think just looking at it from a more holistic perspective is really important. India, there's incentive, there's value. Some people can, that's why it's better in India, but I think it's a misnomer to be like, the West manages their waste better. It's just collected. They have better collection systems, right? And they have better landfills. They're actually, they're like certain levels of landfill where it doesn't have like seepage into the soil and like professionally built and stuff like that. But it's not treated much better.
Gayatri, would you like to take a?
Captured it. I think he captured. Certainly, it helps that segregation happens, right? Wherever you, I mean, at least in most of Europe, wherever you go, you can throw away your glass, paper, plastic, and organic matter separately. I think that helps, but I think Anish really hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of it that's just it's not in the West anymore. That's why. I mean, go to Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and the answer is obvious. But also that some of these public systems and services inherently, not some, most, inherently function more than they do in our country. And that's something that we as citizens need to ask ourselves why.
Traditionally, and thanks for whoever put that question in, traditionally, and this is to everyone, traditionally, it is basically a lot of stakeholders are mentioned in the system, but there are two stakeholders that carry, or three actually, that carry power to pay. We've clearly realized individuals don't pay, so that's out. So it's either the private sector or the government, just from a public policy perspective. So in your opinion, in everyone's opinions, who's the right party to look to pay to solve for this problem? And I realize we're never going to get to consensus, and that's perfectly okay, but just having more opinions at the table and reasons for it is useful.
I think as much as I want the individuals to own it, it's just not realistic, right? We're not, and especially a country it was coming out of poverty, and you can't. It's just even source segregation. It's nice. Let's try it, but it's not the solution. What happens after you segregate in the house, where it goes, like that's more important, because some of it gets mixed and thrown into the same buckets. So it's really complex. I think my perspective is that we just need to make the waste valuable. It's a resource. There should be reason to collect it and separate it and put it back into the economy as a resource, whether it's wet waste, so if you make it valuable, like I think I talked to Shekhar, who's the founder of Hasirudalla. He's like, if you're willing to pay 25 rupees a kilo for this waste, the streets of Bangalore will be clean, right? So it's a value creation, right? So how can we use, my perspective, how do you use human ingenuity to increase the value of waste, and things will align. Then whether the government pays or private sector pays doesn't matter, because there's actual value creation happening. I think maybe it's a more idealistic solution, but I think the government definitely has an onus to play some part in this equation. But yeah, I think that's my perspective.
So I think just to add to that, there's certainly a very important need for regulation and enforcement. And I think if that is something that we can explore, it can certainly drive a lot of behavior change. And that is something that as a nation, we've been a little averse to doing. We've been a little hesitant about seeing how we collect our waste and what policies and what regulation comes in for that. But I think that's critically important. And if we want to solve it, whether we want to solve it in the urban context or even the rural context, there has to be some sort of enforcement that has to come in. Without that, we can come back here again, we'll have same dialogues, we'll have same conversations, but you have to enforce. And without that, I don't think we're going to have a solution.
Gayatri, would you like?
I think there's also a big case for simplification of, of the way waste management is run, from a public perspective. If when I've sat down with, LADs and various urban local bodies and concessionaires and so on, and you listen to the kinds of challenges they face, and, honestly, you feel for them, right? Yes, it is the government's job, but how can that become a little bit more, not a lot more streamlined? How can there be potentially less departments involved in, two aspects of one thing, right? So all of that, I think there's a big role for, civil society to play in enabling that. But ultimately, I do think that it's the government's responsibility to regulate better and enforce better, like Vishal said.
Yeah, to be fair, just again to partly answer the question slightly differently. Globally, no government's gotten it right yet. There are some experiments in Latin America that actually look very interesting, involving the waste pickers. They're actually not very different from the Bangalore model that was designed for DWCCs, etc., to bring that in, keep the cost low for government also, and so on and so forth. But as of now, no one's really come up with a solution, whether private sector or government anywhere in the world. So still all grappling with it. But thanks. I think now they've shut off. No, they haven't shut off my access to the tab yet. So I'll go over one last question, unless one last one. Thanks. All right. Sorry, took me a while to find what I was looking for. So again, we're back to behavior change, slightly different. Can we look at young people mobilizing behavior change for waste collection? And what are some of the ways that this can bring about significant impact? So, if we could take it from both the rural and the urban contexts, would be useful.
Sure. So, as we have to implement our program on the ground, we really wanted to get the local youth and local communities involved. And as we build programs, we decided to start training local youth. And it just so happened we chanced upon, this is about, again, by accident, it wasn't by design, but we discovered something on the way. About 4 years ago, we started a program called Change Makers, where we actually went and trained local village youth, girls who had just finished school and were actually, some of them were not going to go to college and didn't know what the future was going to be. We trained them to come and do our programs, and then they actually they became the teachers for our education program. So today we have about 170 change makers, all girls, between the ages of 18 to about 26, 27, who have now become firebrand ambassadors. These ambassadors for us, or change makers, today we have, now the program has grown, so we have about almost 380 change makers in Punjab who are implementing our program on the ground. And they become the ambassadors who actually go out and also talk about the program and talk about how a particular, what are the incentive, for example, for waste management or for any other program that we have. So yes, looping in youth on the ground is very, very important, and that's the way to go. That's where you build ownership.
Thank you. Gayatri, you want to take it up in the urban context?
Yeah, I think we've not really experimented so much with, like Vishal said, around change makers and young people in the work we do in waste. I mean, we've seen it in other sectors like, mosquito control, dengue, malaria that we work on, and it's worked beautifully. So I can imagine it would work here as well. What we do is work with young people in schools. Because simply the power of education, and whether it's climate change, whether it's waste, or whether it's equity, I do believe that generations who are currently in school are thinking about these things much before we did, and have a lot of faith in them to be able to make the kinds of choices that older generations haven't. So yeah, I think it's absolutely necessary.
Thank you. Just to quickly add to that. At the end of the day, this is the world that we're leaving the youth, right? So logically, they do already seem to want to pick up the responsibility, as Gayatri said, way more socially, environmentally aware than we were, than I was when I was their age, clearly. But also it is their world, and we're already taking it to tipping point or close to it. And therefore, do think that youth will have a big role to play. They seem to want to step up, so as much as we can involve them, like Vishal was saying, is a great idea. With that, I will say thank you to my amazing panel and to everyone else.
Thank you very much for the broad-ranging perspective that you managed to cover in the last hour. Most importantly, for placing people in the middle of inclusive value chains. Really appreciate your inputs. Thank you very much. Thanks, Akshay. Our next session is Navigating the Fundraising Landscape by Meta. This will see leading foundation and CSR minds discuss the idea of capital with a purpose. Please do stay back. Thank you.